And that frequency that psychic information comes in at is higher than the frequency us humans naturally vibrate at. Because I think it's actually all a vibrational match. And so when we're going about our day, depending on what's going on, how stressed out we are, did we sleep, do we have enough water or food? So our vibration is going to fluctuate. And if we're in a bad mood, we're angry, we're processing a lot of heavy grief, our vibration is naturally going to be lower. So the key to psychic awareness and bringing in information is you actually have to get your frequency high enough in order to be a vibrational match. So when you think about mediumship, not all psychics are mediums, but from what I've seen, most mediums can also do psychic work. So why is that? Because on the frequency scale, if psychic information is here, mediumship is even higher. You have to get your frequency that much higher in order to connect with someone or a pet that's passed away.
Hi, Dallisa. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Derek. This is going to be fun. I know we're going to get
Yeah,
into a lot of juicy stuff.
yeah, so good. I'm really excited to talk to a fifth generation psychic. And I would love to know a little bit about your journey. Like, is it something that you just went for because it was in your ancestry, or did you take some time to, cuddle up next to it? Yeah, tell me about the journey a little bit.
This is not what I thought I would be doing for a career. So it makes it a little bit more interesting for me. I did grow up in a family that was very open about spirituality and things that were of the unseen, ghosts and apparitions. My grandmother, Eloise, could see full body apparitions with her physical eyes and describe who they were and what clothes they were wearing or presenting as, in the apparition. And she would often talk about her predictions as her ESP, her extrasensory perception. And she'd call me Lisi. And she would say, Lisi, do you want to know about the ESP that I'm getting? And as a kid, I was half terrified and half intrigued by what my grandmother was about to tell me. I remember one of the things that she told me when I was a kid. Remember it vividly. We were sitting in her living room and she said, Lisa, you're going to need a stage name one day. And I thought, gosh, that's strange, because at the time I didn't know that I had these gifts. They didn't actually drop in until 2015. And so I thought the stage name maybe had to do with the acting classes that I was doing at school or the plays that I was in or the dance classes that I was taking. And she had me practice writing out a stage name. And she said, I've really loved the name Del Rey. What if you called yourself Dallisa Del Rey? And I had a piece of paper and a pen. I was practicing my signature. And many, many, many years later, after she was already gone from Earth, I was invited by a hotel and casino in Las Vegas to have my own psychic stage show where I was pulling members of the audience up on stage. And in honor of her, I ended up calling my production company Del Rey Productions in honor of her and that prediction that she had made so many years ago.
Beautiful. We're both double D, by the way. That's awesome. Yeah, I'd love to know let's back up a little bit and just explain to the audience if people are listening to this and are like, what are these guys talking about? Just give people a bird's eye view of what mediumship is and what psychic abilities are.
I get that question a lot. And I often just go about my day thinking, oh, everybody understands it. But most people in the surrounding world, most people have no idea, what I'm doing. Although I think probably much of your audience has a sense of what it is. And so psychic information and being a psychic is making predictions about the future, something that's unfolding in someone's life, but they want more information about it. Or I also make a lot of world predictions and I can tune into a question, what's like, for example, what's going to happen with fill in the blank war. And I can channel on a question like that or the economy or the future of real estate. And so I can do both for personalized or for, the greater world. And that frequency that psychic information comes in at is higher than the frequency us humans naturally vibrate at, because I think it's actually all a vibrational match. And so when we're going about our day, depending on what's going on, how stressed out we are, did we sleep, do we have enough water or food, so our vibration is going to fluctuate. And if we're in a bad mood, we're angry, we're processing a lot of heavy grief, our vibration is naturally going to be lower. So, the key to psychic awareness and bringing in information is you actually have to get your frequency high enough in order to be a vibrational match. So, when you think about mediumship, not all psychics are mediums, but from what I've seen, most mediums can also do psychic work. So, why is that? Because on the frequency scale, if psychic information is here, mediumship is even higher. You have to get your frequency that much higher in order to connect with someone or a pet that's passed away. And so you have to, raise your own frequency so much more, which is why not all psychics are mediums, because if you're pulling in predictions, you might not be able to get your frequency high enough. Maybe you haven't worked that muscle enough. So that's how I kind of like to explain what the frequency scale is and how we can work with it. But I think everyone is psychic. I think we can all work the muscle enough to get our own intuition about our own lives. And if we want to become readers or psychics for other people, we can certainly do that. But some people, I think, are born with it and are able to dip into that energy a lot faster and a lot easier. But I think everyone else that doesn't feel like that direct connection through their own lineage, they can do it by, usually, I tell my psychic development students, the best way to do it is a couple of things. One is journaling, because it creates more space. You get everything kind of out of the head. You create more space in your energy field, which allows more psychic awareness and intuition to come through. The second thing would be, really, I feel, is a non-negotiable with developing your psychic abilities or your intuition, is guided meditations or binaural beats or some kind of form of meditation. But the third thing that a lot of people don't talk about that I think works the muscles and develops the skills probably the fastest, alongside those two, journaling and meditation, is practicing on people you don't know. And I'm not talking about like going into the grocery store and walking up to somebody that you've never met and giving them a message, because they might not want it. I would never recommend anyone do that. But you can join a community. Like, I've got a Discord community. Like, you can go in there and ask a stranger for, who wants to have a reading? I want to practice. And that way you can connect with people that you don't know, because it's the only way to really understand if the information that you are getting through your psychic dictionary, through your impressions, your feelings, your downloads are accurate, is if you practice on someone you don't know and they give you that validation and that confirmation, and then you can start to understand how spirit is communicating with you.
Beautiful. And a question I have is, in a psychic reading, and when you're tapping into that vibrational field, are you are timelines collapsing and you're reading the timeline, or are you being guided by a guide or a spirit that is then relaying the message to you? I know in mediumship, there's an actual connection normally to the spirit, so that's a little bit different. But in the instance where you're actually getting information, how is that technically working?
I go into what I just refer to as source energy or universal energy. So I go into the highest frequency available. And just by really setting that intention and making my frequency high enough, I can pull forward that information. So I like when I'm working with a client, for example, I do invite their angels, their guides, their ancestors of white light to step in because I do think it makes the connection stronger, but it's more like I want them to step in to be supportive and helping with that connection between me and the client, me and the source energy. So it's more like allies stepping in to boost the connection and the frequency, but I don't actually have to tap into any one guide or angel. I don't need to use any tools like cards or astrology, even though I do like blending them into the session because they're interesting. So I've been very fortunate that I don't have to rely on any one thing and I can go directly into the energy of all that is. So it doesn't even feel like necessarily a timeline. It just feels more like a realm of highest possibility and highest potential. And I can look at that and describe it. And I get lots of channeled messages when I'm tuned into that, which often I don't remember most of it afterwards. Um, but yeah, the timeline itself, and if we think about timing, timing can be so fickle because once we get done looking at the highest potentiality, whatever you decide to do as the client next can adjust that. So I look at it as here's what I think is most likely to happen. You can speed that up or slow that down, but that's really dependent on what you believe. Are you telling yourself you can do it? Or are you holding yourself back? Are you creating delays in your own pathway? So there's a lot of little, you know, things that affect what happens next. But I've had great success with it over the last decade, and I have amazing clients and students all over the world. So it's been working really, really well. But yeah, sometimes it's kind of hard to put it into human words.
And when people get information about their futures, is there a part of them that you think is then creating that future, stepping into that possibility? Or do you feel they could also uncreate that future? I mean, you just kind of said that in a way. So why is it helpful for people to actually know? What do you think it is that they're receiving when they could either undo or create the actual thing they're hearing?
You ask a great question, Derek, and this is something I've been discussing a lot in my work, especially the last 6 months. Because I think everything we need is already inside of us. I don't think you have to go to a psychic, which sounds really strange coming from a psychic medium. You don't have to go to anyone else. You don't have to go to a card reader. You don't have to go to an astrologer. But sometimes I think it helps us to sort through what it is that we actually do want. Because if you can hear the highest potentiality or you can, walk away from that and change something about it, maybe hearing it from someone else that doesn't know the ins and outs of your life, and you hear that and you go, oh my God, I don't want that to happen, or I really do want that to happen. And maybe you feel this excitement rush through you as someone is describing something that doesn't know you. And you feel like, wow, I didn't know how badly I actually wanted this. So I think it can push us more into what we want and making that more of a reality and more concrete for ourselves, or we can hear something and go, not that. Thank God I'm hearing about this energy now so that I can make changes so that I don't go down that pathway that's going to lead me into this challenge. So I do think we have some free will, but I will also say I do think before we're born we do select some things that I don't think a lot of free will can budge. And I think those are more of the big lessons that our soul wants to learn and asked to learn before we ever came here. And some of those things are just fated. I find that a lot of people usually come to me after they've had a brush with that destiny or that fate, and something has happened that really shakes them to the core. And they want help in seeing it from different angles so that they can better understand what am I supposed to learn through everything I just went through? Because I don't want to have to repeat that again. And I do think with some people that I've seen, they may pick the same kind of theme, and in the fated like blueprint of this incarnation, maybe they have 5 different things that are fated that all have to do with a theme like self-worth. And if they don't learn it the first time with maybe something that's a little bit smaller that they can go through, learn, then the second time gets louder, third time gets even louder, so on and so forth. So a lot of people will come to me and say, "This rocked my world, and I don't want to go through the next layers of learning self-worth because this was hard enough." And so I think it's also, good to go to somebody that you trust as a practitioner that can help you make sense of the journey that you're on.
Yes. Yeah. One thing I wanted to ask you, since connecting with you, is about a year and a half ago, my clairaudience and clairsight started to open up in plant ceremony only. And I started to see spirits. I started to be able to track them in the room, and even sometimes they speak to me. And of course, well, not of course, but outside of plant medicine, I can't connect in that way. And I don't know if I want to, actually, because it's quite an intense experience, right? To be and seeing spirit, and, to have that close interaction, though I every day I pray to spirit, and I pray to the unseen world. I think it's the ancestors are probably here behind me right now as we speak, and yours are there. What would you recommend for someone interested like me to really develop that more in my non altered states of with medicine? And would you even recommend it? Is it something that sometimes I get the feeling like it would be so intense if that lens, if I were seeing life through that lens all the time?
Yeah, I would imagine that the altered state is likely more vivid than how it is for your kind of average everyday psychic medium, because of the frequency that you would be at in the altered state. It probably wouldn't have some of the human boundaries that we have just in our normal day-to-day life, right? So I think the first thing, and one of the most simple things I start with my students, is you have to want it. And you even said something a moment ago of like, I don't even know if I want this. So that would be a huge roadblock that I see in a lot of people, is they're like, "Oh, I'm curious. I want it, I think, but I'm not sure. And I only want it in a certain way, or if it's going to happen in that way." And so I think it's more about getting specific about how you do want to work with it and what that would be like for you. So I'll give you an example. My grandmother, as I mentioned, she could see full body apparitions with her eyes. Like, she didn't even see it as a clairvoyant that just kind of plays out in front of you, almost like a daydream or in your mind's eye. No, she could see them with her own eyeballs. And I was petrified. I was like, I never want to see things like that. I don't want to be walking through my house and see a spirit like that. So when my gifts dropped in 2015, they dropped in. My very, very first experience was with somebody that had just died hours before, who I didn't know, that came in while I was dreaming in the astral state using telepathy. It was like so like gentle, and the approach that that spirit had with me was so kind, and it felt very like approachable, right? It wasn't scary. And then through the last 10, almost 11 years, most everything that I see looks like a daydream playing out in front of me, or I can close my eyes and see it in my mind's eye, which I feel a lot better about, instead of, seeing it like my grandmother saw it. So spirit can work with us in how we want to experience it. It's a two-way street. And so you could start making the intention, for example, of Spirit, I want to be able to see things as a clairvoyant that looks like a daydream, things that I can see in my mind's eye. Please start showing me things in that way. I've had probably the greatest growth in getting psychic information by doing binaural beat meditations, and that's originally in August of 2015. I had just come out of a retreat where I had been doing several meditations that were binaural beat style, and it was on the heels of that trip when the woman who had died had come through. And I think that anybody that wants to set that intention to be able to see or to hear or to feel, whatever the intention is, I think having that intention and going into regular binaural beat meditations, I think you'll actually start activating it. Some people get scared because they think once they turn it on that it's going to be very overwhelming. I can turn my frequency on and off, or in the purpose of the frequency scale, I can turn it up so that I can receive information, and then I can turn it down by becoming more grounded, turning on the TV, eating some food, doing human things. So I can go in and out of it. And when I'm out doing normal things like going to the grocery store, going out to eat at a restaurant, I do not have my signal turned up so that I can receive that information. But I will say I have an agreement with Spirit that even if I'm not working, if there is something important that I need to know, they can bring it forward to me because I would rather know. They also know not to bring it to me, late at night when I'm trying to get ready to go to sleep, again, unless it's something really important. But they are allowed to bring me information in the dream state if it's something that will be helpful, like a premonition.
Yeah, and mine are more like your grandmother's. Mine are full open-eyed, and so I'm fully present. I think if it were more internal vision, it would be easier to approach, but because it's in full sight, it can get intense. But I really appreciate that. Part of my hesitancy might be disrupting the field, as you say. And you said something really beautiful because I also find that my guides and spirits work with me a lot in dreams. And let's just talk a little bit because so many people discredit their dreams and they don't give dreams the weight that I believe dreams have, which is, not always. Of course, we're going to have sometimes dreams that are just kind of going through the day, but there are other dreams that have these lessons and these messages, and knowing and remembering our dreams is such a gift. So I would love to hear more what you think about the dream state.
I think there's a lot of wisdom that we can gather from our time that we're asleep. Of course, it's important for our brain and our body to get that rest, but there's so much going on energetically that we can access. And something we can all do before we go to bed at night or whenever we go to sleep is, spirit, show me information in my dream state that would be helpful for me. Or make up your own intention that feels aligned with you. And then when you wake up, write down something. Write down a shape, a color, a person, a location, a feeling. Like just write down, even if it's just one thing, because your brain then starts to remember things more and more. And each time when you get in the habit and you wake up and you write something down, you'll start getting more and more, and they'll become more vivid. I had, a dream premonition. I wouldn't necessarily feel like I should call it a dream, but this one's really interesting because I could prove that it happened. So last year, January of 2025, I had a premonition in my dream state where there was a collision between a helicopter and an airplane. And I woke up and it was jarring. Like, it felt like I was actually witnessing this collision. And I heard Spirit say, which I wasn't working, I just rolled out of bed with pajamas on and no makeup on. And Spirit says, make a video about it. Okay, because I make a lot of 60-second videos. All right. So anybody could go back to January of last year and find this video of me in my pajamas. And I talked about what I saw. And a couple of days later, there was the helicopter airplane collision that happened in the Washington, D.C. area that killed tragically so many people. And there were many people that had seen the original video and then, of course, see the headlines. And people started commenting and saying, "Oh my God, like you saw this, you predicted this." So I do feel like it is a direct line of proof that we can get premonitions in our dreams. Because oftentimes, we might tell a friend or tell a loved one of a dream that we have, but there's no like date and time stamp of when we got that information. So I think it's a rare occurrence to be able to have that on film. But I think the reason why I was told to make the video is to basically, because there's nothing I could do about it. I didn't know what the tail number was or where the location was in the dream. Not that I remember anyway. But I think sometimes spirit wants us to share the thing to show people that it is real, that there's proof that it's real, and that more and more people can feel comfortable with their own kind of supernatural experiences.
Mm. Yeah. And so much of this seems to be predicated on vibration. We keep talking about vibration, and I would even suggest that when we're in a dream state, our vibration levels higher because we're relaxed, and all of our functions are just just like in dream. What are maybe some techniques that we can use to raise our vibration or adjust our vibration? You talk about turning on and off the antenna. I would love to know more about that.
It does feel like it is intentional with raising it or lowering it. I think we can first check in with our emotions. What am I feeling right now? And especially those that are interested in developing their intuition or their psychic abilities, or they want to do client work, being in tune with your emotions is one of the most important things because we all feel the same emotions as human beings. But if we are having something within ourselves emotionally that's heavier, shame, guilt, regret, anger, rage, our vibration's going to be lower. So the best kind of psychic work does not happen when you're feeling heavy emotions. So I would say, work on yourself first. Do your inner healing first as the priority before trying to raise it. I don't think it's about bypassing the lower frequencies. I think it's about learning why that lower emotion is there. What is it trying to show us? There's always treasure in the lower emotions of what it's trying to point to, and could be part of, what makes you feel more aligned with why you're here on earth, and are you aligned with what you feel your soul's purpose was, or themes that you're supposed to be learning about. So become more curious and inquisitive about your emotions so that you can go within and work on those, because the more you work on those lower frequencies, then the more naturally you'll be in the higher frequencies and being able to go into those higher frequencies. And there's something spirit wants me to mention here as I'm hearing it in my ear about really doing your own intuitive work around the practitioners that you're going to work with.
Mm.
Because if they are going through a chapter in their life or a really heavy stage that they're in, I'm not saying, don't ever talk to them or do anything with them. But I found that as a practitioner, if you are some kind of channel, whatever you are going through becomes somewhat of a filter that everything you channel goes through. And so I take the work very seriously. If there's something that happened the day before and I've got client sessions the next day, you better believe that I am really sitting with myself and doing that journaling and the meditations and maybe going for a walk or a bike ride out in nature. And I'm doing breath work and stretching my body, so that I can feel ready to go the next day when I have to do client work. So that's really important. And you can always ask a practitioner, what's your method? What's your process? Like, how do you work through lower emotions? And I think most practitioners are going to tell you what they do. Or if they don't answer you, maybe that's a little bit of a red flag of like, why do they not want to talk about it? We all go through this stuff. But I think that the emotional work is probably one of the most important pieces to this. But any doctor would probably give you a list of here are all the things you can do to be a healthier person. Eat whole fruits and vegetables and drink plenty of water and get lots of sleep. Like all of those things are also going to raise your frequency. And so you can ask yourself, if I were going to think about my life and do a little bit of an energy audit, what do I feel like are the habits and behaviors that I have right now that are making my frequency higher? What are the habits and behaviors I have right now that are probably lowering it? And am I willing to give those a rest or give those up? So, for example, uh, alcohol use, drug use, both some prescription and recreational drugs, I would put in that category, depending on what the prescription drug is. But I've also seen addictions interfere with the frequency. So things, gambling, anybody that's addicted to drugs or alcohol or shopping, like you can name all different kinds of addictions. And usually that will not only lower the frequency, but I often, with people that have addictions, will see an entity that usually, for whatever reason, my experience has been the ones that I have seen live in the base of the top of the neck, the upper
Mhm,
back, or the bottom of the
mhm,
neck and the upper back. Yep, right in
mhm.
there. So, and I've done energy and entity, removals and clearings over the years. A shamanic practitioner can also do entity removals. Some people would feel more comfortable asking for help from a priest. They will often do entity removals. They might, call it an exorcism or something else. But I've noticed there's a lot with addiction energies.
Yeah, I would add one more thing to that is, people. So if you're hanging out with low vibration people, you're going to also absorb that vibrational frequency. So who you hang out with and who you surround yourself with, so important, so important. Yeah, great. Okay, let's talk about mediumship. Oh, I love this so much. I just this last weekend I sat with a Ubanda teacher, and Ubanda is a tradition, it's Afro-Brazilian, and their main practice is mediumship. And it's an African tradition that then went to Brazil, and the Brazilians, kind of made it their own at some point. It combined with Santo Daime and had some influences, and they started using medicine to facilitate the mediumship within the ceremony. So it's really fascinating. And I myself have experienced possession a few times, not intentional, but it just happened because of what the space I was in and the frequency I was at. So I'd love to just talk a little about what mediumship is, how you approach it. Is it, are there protections that you take in mediumship? Yeah, I would love to know a little bit about that.
Usually, when a spirit of either a person or an animal comes forward, they step forward directly in front of me, and they're usually a few feet above the ground that I'm at. So it's almost like it's a dimension that's overlaid on top of ours to some degree, because it feels like when we go to the other side, it feels like we literally just go in the room next to ours. It doesn't feel like we're having to travel great distances to get there. It feels like it's already here, but we just have to shift that frequency in order to be a vibrational match to get there. And so when we leave our physical body, which keeps us naturally just a lower vibration, that when we leave the physical body, we naturally start vibrating at the frequency of the other side. Yeah, I've had a few things happen over the years where there could be, an energy stepping forward that either is not a good energy or they have nefarious motives. They've been very, very few and far between. What I like to do and what has been incredibly helpful is calling in Archangel Michael whenever that happens and asking him to move that energy either completely away from me and the energy field. There have been a few times where I could feel that the person had something that they wanted to say. I didn't necessarily feel like it was in the most helpful way. So instead of removing them altogether, if there's still something I wanted to ask them or communicate with them, I would just ask Archangel Michael to actually back up that energy away from me so it's not so close into my energy field. So you can do both. Um, I've also had experiences with people that have passed away that don't fully understand how to get to the other side or what happened. Like there's some kind of lingering question. And I've helped move many, many souls up to the white light. Archangel Michael helps with that as well. I My show in Las Vegas used to be at a haunted hotel and very fitting, but there was this room up near the top of the hotel that had a congregation, probably the most spirit activity I've ever seen anywhere in all of my work. And they loved being together. All of these energies, it was like their hangout spot. And I went in there one day and I offered, does anybody want to go into the white light? And there were so many that said, no, we like it here. And they just decided to stay in that location. An example of a time when I did this was not too long ago, a couple years ago. There was somebody that was murdered by a stranger in a casino, and I'd heard about it on the news. I was at the casino a couple days later, and of course, that person that had just been killed was there. And I think people that have, psychic mediumship abilities, I think we must emit some kind of light or antenna or some
Mm.
frequency because he knew that I could help him. And he asked me what happened, which I thought, gosh, I thought we know like everything after we leave the physical body. But it's happened a few times now that I can't deny it. So, I tell him what happened, I explain it, and I opened up a portal of white light over where he and I were standing, I guess you could say. And Archangel Michael was there. But what was really interesting is he had so many friends and family on the other side that actually came through the light and he saw them and they took him up and it was like almost immediately bringing him up into the white light. So it was like he just needed to see them and know that it was like okay to leave the casino. And so that was very, very strange. But on the heels of that, I'll share one more quick thing because Spirit's nudging me that I do think that not only people who have departed, but people that are alive can recognize that frequency, antenna, light, whatever it is that we have. Because I had an experience several years ago where somebody I'd never seen, never met, who I could sense had some mental issues. And frankly, I think it was schizophrenia. Walked up to me in my neighborhood and said, how do I make them stop? And I knew exactly what he was talking about. But how did he know that I would know what he was talking about? And I think sometimes, I would always say go to a doctor and talk to them about what's happening. But I do think sometimes mental diagnosis, maybe like schizophrenia, is a heightened, maybe super heightened sense of psychic awareness and mediumship that is maybe without any kind of boundaries or ability to control it.
Yeah, I've read that also. I think it's true. What are your views on the underworld, if you have any?
The only thing that I feel like I've seen with that is associated with near death experiences. And I used to study them a lot. Ironically, in a way, I grew up in the Seattle area. My pediatrician was the leading expert on near death experiences in children. I had the absolute pleasure of actually taking a semester in Las Vegas. I went to college at UNLV. Dr. Raymond Moody, who is very well known as a leading expert in near death experiences, he was my teacher for a whole semester on near death experiences. And yeah, that is just mind blowing. So through all of these different case studies and my experience with communicating with so many people that have passed away, and frankly, some of those people not doing great things while they were alive. Maybe they were abusive in some way, for example, that they don't stay in like a permanent residency of hell. Like, I've never been shown that someone stays there forever and ever. But I do think there's something truly fascinating about the life review process that many near death experiencers have talked about, which is going through their entire life that they just had. Could even feel like the blink of an eye because there's no real time on the other side. And they go through everything that they just had in their lifetime, but they feel it through the other people's perspective. So if you're driving down the freeway and you're screaming at somebody out your car window and you're making obscenities to them, and that during your life review, you'll actually feel that from the other person's perspective that you're yelling at on, as you're going down the road. But I don't think it's out of punishment, because I do think that we have different lifetimes. Sometimes we play the part of the really good person, sometimes we play the part of the really awful person. So I don't think the life review is intentionally done to punish us, but instead to help our soul evolve even more so we can understand all of our actions and what happens because of those, which I think could upset some people because they've run into really horrible people in their life, and they'll say to me, because I've talked about this on other shows, they'll say, "Well, how could that person that did all of this damage or hurt all of those people or, did horrible, horrible things, they don't go to like a permanent place where they rot there?" And what I've been shown is, okay, they have their life review, but they still have a lot that they have to process and heal on the other side. It's not like they get a free ticket to paradise and they're hanging out with everybody else. So they have to go through much deeper, almost like restoration when they get back over to the other side. And I would challenge people to try to consider it from maybe a different viewpoint. If we're all here playing parts for each other and we're all teachers for each other, the person that comes into a community and does something horrible and that ripples through so many people and it changes their lives for the good, for the bad, because of that one person's action, it gave so many other people on this very advanced Earth school an opportunity to go deeper into their own healing and their own evolution. Because once you get back to the other side, you realize, like, oh, we were all just playing parts for each other. And you see it from a much more neutral perspective. But while we're here with many of us having the veil of amnesia, we forget that this is more like a movie that we're all playing parts in for each other.
Yeah, speaking of playing parts, I see so many people with the issue of self-worth. And I noticed in your PDF that you sent me, you like to talk about that. And I would love to know your views on self-worth and what people can do to start to remedy that in themselves.
The relationship with ourself is one of the most important relationships that we can have while we're here. I've seen in hundreds and hundreds of different people that the theme of self worth directly impacts the level, I think, of happiness that they feel in their own life. Because when I've done all these sessions and talked to people about whether it's work or the relationship that they're in, for example, most of the time it comes down to they don't believe that they can do better. There's something in there that keeps holding them back. And it could be a relationship that they had when they were young that still has a hold on them. It could be a loss of trust in someone that they love deeply, and now they've lost trust in other people, they've lost trust in themselves. So, if we can really understand that we were born worthy and there's nothing that we can do to lose that worthiness, that value, and we actually believe it, we start operating from a completely different place. And I think it scares people when they hear that because some people hearing this right now may think to themselves, like, oh, yeah, I don't have much confidence. Like, oh, yeah, I'm always talking down to myself. I'm very pessimistic about who I am and what I can do. And I just don't think I can do much anymore. Like, kind of a bit of a victim mentality. They might hear that, hey, you can shift that and your life's going to change. And they may not want the change. There's a lot of people that are afraid of change. But if you can start to see this as more of like you're the star of your own movie and you get to, co-create the script that you have with the universe, then what kind of life would you want to have? Because it's never too late. But I think a few examples of this that I've seen would be somebody wanting to know, like, oh, if I leave my relationship, will I find someone else? Like, okay, well, let's deal with these in two parts. One, why do you want to leave the relationship? And usually it's because they're starting to awaken to the fact that they want more or they deserve more, but they're afraid if they leave, there's not going to be anyone else on the other side of it. So the other part of the conversation usually is, well, if you don't love yourself more, if you don't build the relationship with yourself more, you will probably attract the same lesson in a different costume. And they're like, oh, well, I don't want to do that. So then I talk to them about, well, if your heart really feels like this is not the relationship you want to be in anymore, would you allow yourself permission to exit out of that relationship and be in a relationship with yourself? Spending more time with yourself, doing things that are more aligned with self-care, doing something each day that helps you build trust within yourself, making yourself your own priority. Because when you do that, then you actually start attracting a relationship in with someone that has also really done that work on themselves. And now you're attracting that much higher frequency relationship in that aligns with the self value that you now have for yourself. The other part of life I usually see this in is work, where someone will come to me and say, I don't want to be at the job I have anymore, but I don't know, can I find another job? And it's the same kind of thing. If you don't believe you can do better, you probably won't, right? And so if you want to quit your job, we probably need to have a conversation about, well, what do you want to do next then? And do you believe you can have it? Do you believe you can go find a new job? Is that what you actually want? And what's interesting is when I peel back the layers around work, most people will ultimately land where they say, I would love to work for myself. Like, great. So what do you want to do? Let's reverse engineer this. It just happened yesterday. Spirit said, reverse engineer it. And I knew exactly what they meant. You decide on, let's say you're the person listening that's like, I'd love to be my own boss. I'd love to have my own schedule. Okay, cool. What do you want to do? And a lot of people may stumble on that question, but, journaling, meditating, time by yourself in nature, all those things can help create the space for the information to start coming in. what you may want to do. Some people think about what did they want to do when they were 5, 6, 7, 8 years old? What was it that you were like play acting in your living room or in your yard when you were growing up? So decide what it is you want to do because I think everything else you can figure out. I think you can figure out, okay, well, how do I start the paperwork? Like how do I find clients? What do I say on social media? All that you can figure out. Those are just like the logistical things that you have to do and make happen. But I would start at the end point of having a successful business doing fill in the blank, and then you can start to figure out all the other pieces.
Yeah, figuring out what we wanna do in life is always a huge question.
And you can change your mind. You don't have to do
Absolutely.
the same thing for the rest of your life. You
Yeah.
can just ask yourself, if I could work with, let's say it's a client, if I could work with a client and I could wake up on a Tuesday morning and work with that person, what would I want to help them with? It could be
Mm,
anything. What do I want to help them with? And on that note, I've noticed in the spiritual industry, there are a lot of people that get into the industry because they want to be a helper or a fixer. They want to be a rescuer. And that is the fastest way to get to burnout.
totally.
And
Do it
so
for
there's,
yourself.
yes, do it for yourself. But if you're like, oh gosh, I feel he just hit a nerve with something, there is a book that absolutely changed my life. It's really short. I would get the physical copy of it. I bought mine on Amazon. About $8, really reasonable. It's called The Power of Ted, TED, like the name of a gentleman. The Power of Ted. The author is David Emerald, Emerald like the gem. It is all about victim triangles and how there's rescuer healers, which I often see a lot of with people that are spiritual practitioners. On the other side of the point of the triangle is the person that's the victim. Woe is me. Life is always out to get me. I can never do anything right. What ends up happening, and the third point, just for reference, is the persecutor, the villain energy. But what I see a lot is between those 2 points on the triangle, that the rescuer healer is finding all these people that have the victim mentality, and the victim mentality person's giving their power to these people saying, tell me what to do. And it keeps like going back and forth, and nobody like actually gets the fulfillment that they're looking for. So the book talks about that in a very simple way. And the latter part of the book talks about the empowerment triangle and how to shift out of those roles and into something that actually empowers you, empowers your client. So anybody that resonates with that, oh gosh, please get that book. I'm not a it's not a paid endorsement, but
Yeah,
it's amazing.
great. And this is a perfect time to talk about Tony Robbins because I saw him on your bio and I also worked with him a bit. So tell us what about him do you like and what did he teach you and yeah.
He really showed me proof of the power of the mind
Mm,
because there was so much hypnosis that happened. And I think in ways where maybe you don't really realize you're being hypnotized while you're working with him in a group, large group setting. But the fire walk that I did was proof of that. It's like, when you're standing in a room with thousands of people and you're just following him, what he's saying, what he's doing. And then all of a sudden, I remember this just like flash of a moment as I am with all these people, and we just look like a herd of people, like slowly walking outside to go step on these hot coals. You could tell we were all hypnotized. But one thing that, besides that, which was amazing to do, and I did have a couple little singe spots on my feet, and I really walked over the hot coals, um, was how he really had me think about the why. And so I'll bring that up in client work sometimes, depending on what we're discussing, but how we each as individuals need to get really clear on why we are going to do it. Why are we going to quit our job? Why are we going to leave that relationship? Whatever it is of the choice that we're making in our life, why are we doing it and why now? Because if you can anchor yourself into the why, and the why is strong enough, like maybe it's somebody saying, "I'm gonna quit smoking cigarettes." Okay, why? If you can get real clear
Mm,
and get like an emotional reason. Maybe it's because your daughter is getting ready to go and graduate high school, and you don't want to feel like you have to leave the graduation ceremony to go smoke a cigarette because you're that addicted to it. So, emotionally, you want to be able to be there for your daughter, and you're going to use that graduation as a milestone for you kicking the habit, right? So, it needs to be something
mhm.
that really touches your heart. Because, from my understanding of what Tony Robbins explained, the more you can get anchored into that, the better chance you have of actually making it happen.
Yeah, I also walked the coals with Tony, and I remember the day because you do it like the 3rd day, I think, or something like that of the retreat. And I remember the 3rd day, I was telling myself this story of why I wasn't gonna do it. "Oh, I'm not gonna do that. I'm too good to walk coals," or, I made all these stories in my head. And then, of course, I sat, because you usually do it at the end of the 3rd day, after he does all his other stuff. And by the end of the day, I was so ready to go. And he knew exactly what was happening in my head. I'm sure he knew exactly. And he just he debunks all that mental chatter. It was such a beautiful lesson of limiting beliefs, which for me was one of the biggest lessons I got from him, which is how that limiting belief that I had, well, I was thinking to myself I couldn't do it, and I was creating all these beliefs that didn't have anything to do with my actual fear of doing it, right? And it was so powerful, and I was so glad I did it. I felt so, talk about empowered. After you run across those coals, you're like, "Oh my, did I just do that?" What's going on? So I'm so happy you did that too. It doesn't seem like a big thing, but it's really a beautiful teaching. Yeah. Yeah, we have a couple minutes left. I know you have to go, but I would love to ask you a quick question. I saw a psychic about a year and a half ago. It was a Vedic psychic, and I didn't know anything about him. And he gave me a reading, and then he told me something during the reading. But then about a month later, he asked me for money to help do an offering for this thing that came up in the reading. So I just want to check in with you for a minute and see what you think. So what he told me in the reading was that I had this masculine entity that was kind of in my field. And he then, basically said I can do some puja, some um, Indian offerings and ceremony to help remove that. One thing he did say, which I thought was, he said, take water and go put the water in a cemetery. For this one thing that he said I could do practically. So I just wanted to check in with you now that I have you here. I just came up. I wasn't going to ask you this, but I thought, why not? She's here. Um,
Yeah, I think
yeah.
a lot of entities outside of the ones that may be connected to abuse or addiction or things like that. I think the other entities we can remove ourselves if we just
Mm,
ask Archangel Michael to remove them. A lot of it, because I've heard this story before, not exactly this scenario, but I've heard people say, oh, they asked for money to clear something. And sometimes it's hundreds and hundreds of dollars for them to do this. And my opinion is don't give them the money. But you could say, well, oh, thank you for letting me know I have the tools and resources to do it myself. But thank you for bringing it to my attention. And I would ask Archangel Michael to clear that entity. I would also ask Archangel Michael to clear that person's energy from your energy field so that they are completely out of it as well. Um, I think that most people that are really on the up and up are going to just charge you one fee and they're going to do whatever they need to do. If that means that you have an entity and they're like, can I remove this? They're not going to say, like, give me more money because it should just be a part of what they are offering as a service. So I would be highly suspicious of anyone ever asking you for more money. If at the end of the session they said, oh, if you want to do another session and we could take a look at these things that I'm seeing or that came up that we haven't gotten to yet, feel free to do that whenever you feel aligned to do that, that's another story. But anyone adding on an additional fee for something that you may or may not actually see or feel in your own energy field, I would not trust that. Um, but like again, I think that if anybody comes to you and says that to you, I would just say, thank you. I have the tools and resources to do that. Thank you for letting me know. And clear all of it. Let it go.
Yeah.
Um, but most people, well, anybody listening to this that hears this, they'll probably know if they have an entity that needs removing, because one of the signals that I've seen is they almost don't feel like they're in charge of their own life anymore.
Mm,
They feel really drained. And sometimes you can see it with like their eyes, and their eyes feel a little sunken, or that the energy has been pulled from the eyes. So I think most people kind of have an idea that there might be an entity that they picked up. But most of the time, if you do pick up an energy from somewhere, you can ask Archangel Michael to move it. He'll move it and release it to the white light. Um, but the ones that need like really removed, I think are few and far between, but that the person would have an idea that something's going on.
yeah, great. And that was my intuition when I got that second email. I was like, oh, this doesn't feel right. But I thought, might as well check in with psychic that
Yeah,
I'm talking to today.
might as well
Yeah,
ask. But yeah, I
might
would
as well
say,
ask.
I'd say delete the email.
Yeah, yeah, I did. I love the Archangel Michael reference because, after I do ceremonies, I'm so open that it's good to have a prayer and a practice that cleans that energy. And I usually do it with a pendulum, but why not bring in Michael in there too at the same time? Because yeah, sweep it all away. So thank you
Yeah.
for that. That's a really powerful thing that I'm taking from this conversation.
Yeah, and I usually say, act like your hand is a brush. And I usually just say, anything that is not mine, go back
Mm,
to source for healing.
mm,
Be gone, be gone, be gone. And I say that over and over again as I brush my
mm,
body. Usually you'll feel it kind of shift and pop
mm.
off within 30, 60, 90 seconds.
Beautiful. I love that. Where can people find you if they would love to get more of you?
Yes, I've got a Substack. I've got my social media account. You can go find that helicopter airplane video I talked about. All the things are over on my website. So that's the easiest place to go find it. There's also a free gift on there. It's a 10-minute audio reset that you can download to your own device to clear and calm your own energy. So everything's over at spiritandspark.com, all spelled out, spiritandspark.com.
Beautiful. And I'll put links in the show notes to all of those things so people can get a hold of them. Thank you so much for your time and for your gifts and for doing what you're doing for the world. It's been a real pleasure to talk with you. There's so many of these subjects that I can't talk to a lot of people about. So I feel like I can just share all these things that I'm experiencing, and it's really a gift. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Derek. I appreciate it. And I hope to talk to you again in the future.
Yeah, I would love that. Bye.